I had always been the responsible one in my family. While my friends were out having fun, I worked part-time jobs, saved every extra dollar, and carefully planned for my future. College was my dream, and I believed my parents would support me like they promised. I pictured myself walking across the stage in a cap and gown, finally achieving something I had worked so hard for. But that dream shattered in one phone call. My mother's voice sounded strained and nervous when she told me the news. "Samantha, we spent your college fund on Ethan." My mind froze. My brother? Ethan. He had always been a handful, but I never imagined my parents would drain my savings for him. I asked her why, and she went on about his drug habit, about rehab, about how he needed help. Then came the part that made my blood boil. They expected me to pay for his rehab too. I couldn't believe it. I felt sick, angry, and betrayed all at once. Every late night I spent babysitting, every shift I worked at the coffee shop, every penny I saved, it had all been taken without my consent. And now they were acting as if it was my responsibility to fix Ethan's problems. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run away, but I also knew I couldn't let this destroy me. For a few days, I stayed quiet, trying to make sense of it all. I watched Ethan stumble around the house, frustrated and defiant, barely acknowledging the chaos he had caused. My parents tiptoed around him, apologizing to me occasionally, but never taking real responsibility. Their words felt hollow. I realized something crucial. If I didn't act, no one would defend me, and my future would be stolen before it even began. I started researching scholarships and grants, anything I could do to replace what was taken. I worked more hours at my jobs, cutting corners in my life to save as much as possible. I even looked into legal advice, just in case there was a way to hold my parents accountable. It wasn't easy. Every day, I wrestled with guilt. Guilt for not helping Ethan, guilt for resenting my parents, guilt for thinking about my own dreams when my family was in chaos. But through all of it, one thought kept me going. I couldn't let this betrayal define me. I was determined to rebuild my life, to achieve my dreams, and to make sure Ethan faced the consequences of his actions without me being his crutch. I realized that sometimes the people who should protect you will fail, and the only person you can rely on is yourself. That day marked the start of my fight, not against Ethan, not even fully against my parents, but for my future. And I promised myself that when I walked across that college stage, I would do it knowing I had taken back control of my life, no matter how broken things had seemed. I couldn't believe it at first. Every time I thought about my college fund, I imagined myself choosing classes, buying books, and finally leaving home for my dream school. But now that future felt like it had been ripped away. My parents sat across from me, calm and almost casual, explaining how Ethan needed help. Ethan sat on the couch, lazily scrolling his phone, barely acknowledging me. He didn't say thank you, didn't seem sorry, didn't even realize the scale of what had happened. All he cared about was getting his next fix and making sure he wasn't uncomfortable. My stomach twisted with anger and disbelief. How could my own brother be so careless, so selfish? And how could my parents act as if it was okay to take everything I had worked for, expecting me to just accept it? The house felt smaller that day. Every corner seemed to whisper betrayal. I thought about all those nights I stayed late working at the cafe, all the hours I spent babysitting and helping with chores just to save money for college. And now it was gone. My parents didn't even apologize properly. They just told me it was my duty to help Ethan, as if years of effort and sacrifice didn't matter. I tried to keep calm, but it was impossible. I asked my mother why they didn't even try to find other solutions. She said that it was too late, that Ethan's situation was urgent, and that family comes first. Family comes first. The words echoed in my head like a cruel joke. Was my family really about protecting each other, or just about covering up mistakes? Ethan shrugged and muttered something about needing rehab. I stared at him, feeling my anger rise. He had no idea how much he had destroyed my future. He acted like he was owed something, like the world owed him forgiveness. And my parents supported him without a second thought. It wasn't just betrayal, it was injustice. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my room, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every sacrifice I had made. My dreams had been stolen, but I realized something important. I wasn't going to let this defeat me. I couldn't change what they did, but I could control what I did next. My anger burned, but it wasn't just rage, it was determination. I decided then that I would find a way to rebuild my future, to get my life back, and to make sure Ethan faced reality. I knew it wouldn't be easy. My heart hurt, my trust was broken, and my family seemed completely unfair. But I also knew that if I let this betrayal break me, I would lose more than money. I would lose myself. So I made a choice. I would fight quietly but fiercely to protect my dreams and my future. And I would make sure that the people who had betrayed me knew that I wasn't powerless. This wasn't the end of my story. It was only the beginning of my fight. The next day, I knew I had to face my parents. I couldn't keep my anger bottled up any longer. I sat them down in the living room, trying to stay calm, though my hands shook. How could you take my college fund without even asking me? I demanded. This was my future. My hard work. My mother, Linda, looked at me with what she thought was understanding. Samantha, Ethan needed help. You know how bad his problem has gotten. We didn't have a choice, she said softly. My father, Mark, added. We did what we had to do. Family comes first. You'll understand someday. I stared at them in disbelief. Family comes first. I had been their child too. I had spent years working, saving, and dreaming. And now they acted like my life and sacrifices didn't matter. Then came the part that made my blood run cold. My parents actually suggested that I help pay for Ethan's rehab. We know it's unfair, Linda said, but you're the responsible one. You can help cover the rest. You can afford it. I felt like the floor had been pulled out from under me. They weren't just defending their actions. They were trying to make me feel guilty for being hurt. They were twisting everything, making it seem like I owed Ethan. Like I was the one who had to fix this mess. I tried to explain. I saved that money for college. I worked for it. You promised to support me. I can't just give it away to fix his mistakes. But they didn't listen. They kept repeating the same line about family, duty, and responsibility. Their words sounded empty and manipulative, like they were designed to confuse me, to make me feel selfish for standing up for myself. In that moment, I felt completely alone. The people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, to support me, had betrayed me. They chose Ethan over me, his addiction over my future, and now they were trying to force me to carry the weight of their choices. I realized I had to make a choice too. I could continue letting them control me, let them manipulate my guilt and sacrifice, or I could stand my ground. I couldn't change their minds, but I could refuse to let them ruin my life. Tears stung my eyes, but I held them back. I told them firmly, I won't pay for his rehab. You made your choices. I won't let this destroy my future. That confrontation left me shaken, but also clearer than ever. Betrayal wasn't just about money. It was about trust, respect, and love. They had failed me, and now I had to rely on myself. I realized that standing up to them was the first step toward taking back control of my life. For the first time, I understood that their decisions didn't define me. How I responded would. And I was determined to rebuild, no matter how much they tried to pull me down. After that confrontation, I knew I couldn't stay passive. I had spent too many years being responsible, being careful, and trusting the people who were supposed to have my back. But now I realized I had a choice. I could let this betrayal destroy me, or I could fight to take back control of my life. I started making plans in secret. I didn't tell my parents or Ethan about anything I was doing. They didn't need to know I wasn't giving up. I researched every scholarship I could apply for, filling out forms late at night after work. I took on extra freelance jobs, doing anything that would help me earn money and save for college. Every small payment, every application, felt like a tiny victory, like I was reclaiming something that was stolen from me. At the same time, I thought about legal options. I wasn't sure if I could actually get my money back, but I wanted to know my rights. I spent hours reading online, writing down notes, and even contacting a lawyer just to ask questions. It was empowering to see that there were ways I could hold people accountable, even if they were my own family. But it wasn't easy. Every step forward came with pain. I still loved my family despite everything. I wanted things to be different. I wanted them to see reason, to understand what they had done. That love clashed with my growing desire for justice. I found myself crying at night, torn between forgiving them and making them face the truth. I also felt anger toward Ethan. He didn't seem to care about the damage he caused. It made me resent him, but I knew I couldn't waste my energy trying to fix him. I had to focus on my life. I had to protect my dreams. Every day was a battle between emotion and logic. I missed the innocence of trusting my parents completely. I missed the comfort of feeling safe in my own home. But I also discovered a side of myself I hadn't known existed: determination, courage, and the ability to fight for what I deserved. Even though it was lonely, I kept going. I knew that my efforts wouldn't be recognized immediately, but the more I worked, the more I realized I was building a future that was truly mine. I didn't have to rely on anyone else. I didn't have to ask for permission or forgiveness. That turning point was when I truly decided I wouldn't be a victim. I would reclaim my future piece by piece, with every scholarship, every freelance job, every bit of research I did. I promised myself that no one, neither my parents nor my brother, would stand in the way of the life I had fought so hard to achieve. For the first time, I felt a sense of control. I knew the road ahead would be hard, but I also knew I had the strength to walk it. This was the moment I stopped waiting for others to save me. I became my own hero. While working late one night on scholarship applications, I overheard my parents talking in hushed tones. They were bragging about some money they had hidden, assets they hadn't mentioned, and ways they had avoided responsibility for Ethan's problems. My stomach twisted. They had spent my college fund, blamed me for Ethan, and yet were keeping money away from me. I felt a surge of anger, but also clarity. I realized I couldn't let this go. I didn't want to hurt them out of spite. I wanted them to face the truth. I wanted accountability. The idea of revenge didn't mean ruining them. It meant showing them that their actions had consequences and that I wasn't powerless anymore. I started gathering evidence quietly. I looked at bills, receipts, and bank statements whenever I could. I took notes on every instance where they lied, mismanaged money, or tried to manipulate me into feeling guilty. Every piece I found added fuel to my determination. I was building a record, a way to prove that I had been wronged and that my future was stolen without reason. It wasn't easy. I had to be careful so they wouldn't notice me digging into things. Every day felt like walking on eggshells, but I reminded myself why I was doing it. I wasn't being petty. I was protecting myself and my life. I couldn't let them get away with treating me like I owed them anything. At the same time, I kept working on my scholarships and freelance jobs. I refused to let the fight for justice stop me from moving forward. Every email I sent, every application I submitted, every extra shift I worked was a step toward reclaiming my life. I wanted them to see that I could thrive even after they tried to hold me back. I also started imagining what would happen when I confronted them with the evidence. Not in anger, but with calm certainty. I pictured their surprise, the way they would try to justify themselves, and how I would remain firm. That vision kept me focused. There were moments when I doubted myself. Was I being too harsh? Could I forgive and move on instead? But then I remembered the betrayal, the stolen dreams, and the constant manipulation. I realized that accountability wasn't the same as cruelty. I wasn't trying to hurt my parents emotionally. I was claiming what was rightfully mine and teaching them that I wouldn't be treated unfairly. By the end of that month, I had gathered enough information to know I could confront them if I needed to. But more than that, I felt empowered. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I had a plan, and I had the courage to see it through. For the first time in months, I felt like I had control, and I knew my fight for justice was just beginning. Even as I worked to rebuild my future and gather evidence against my parents, I couldn't escape the pain of seeing Ethan struggle. Every time I passed him in the house, I saw how lost he was, shaky, tired, and angry at the world. Part of me wanted to reach out, to help him, to make things easier. But I remembered the years of sacrifice, the stolen money, and the way my parents had tried to make me responsible for his problems. I knew I couldn't do it again. The nights were the hardest. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying arguments, overheard conversations, and every broken promise. Guilt gnawed at me. Was I being too harsh? Should I step in for Ethan's sake? But then I reminded myself that my life, my dreams, and my hard work were not negotiable. Sacrificing my future for someone who didn't take responsibility would only hurt me, not help him. I began noticing changes in myself. I felt stronger, more determined, and more capable of standing my ground. Each time I said no to my parents or resisted being manipulated, I felt a small surge of confidence. I realized that I could survive this betrayal, that I could grow through it instead of letting it crush me. At the same time, frustration bubbled inside me. I was frustrated at my parents for betraying me, at Ethan for not taking his life seriously, and at the situation that forced me to carry so much responsibility. I felt alone, even in my own home. But in that loneliness, I also found clarity. I couldn't control anyone else's choices, but I could control mine. Some days, I cried silently in my room, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. Other days, I worked late into the night, forcing myself to focus on college applications, freelance projects, and saving money. I used every bit of energy I had to push forward, to remind myself that I was more than their betrayal and more than Ethan's mistakes. Slowly, I noticed that this struggle was shaping me. I was becoming more resilient, more focused, and more capable of standing up for myself. I realized that my pain had a purpose. It was teaching me how to fight, how to protect myself, and how to value my own life. Through it all, I promised myself I wouldn't let guilt or compassion cloud my judgment. I could care about Ethan without letting him ruin my future. I could love my family without letting them control me. And I could survive this heartbreak while still building the life I deserved. By the time the weeks passed, I felt like a different person, stronger, wiser, and ready. The emotional struggle wasn't over, but I had learned to face it with courage. I knew that no matter how much my family tried to manipulate or pressure me, I could endure, and I could win. Not by hurting anyone, but by reclaiming my own life. After weeks of careful planning and reflection, I realized it was time to take action. I couldn't just sit and wait while my parents and Ethan continued to make decisions that hurt me. I needed a plan that was smart and deliberate, not impulsive or destructive. The first thing I did was reach out to a lawyer. I explained the situation and asked if it was possible to audit my family's finances. I wanted to know exactly how much money had been misused, how my college fund had disappeared, and if there were hidden assets they were keeping from me. The lawyer agreed to help and assured me that everything would remain confidential. That secrecy was crucial. I didn't want my parents or Ethan to suspect what I was doing. While the lawyer started gathering information, I began confiding in a few trusted relatives and friends. I explained my situation without exaggeration or anger. I wanted their advice and support, not pity. Slowly, I built a quiet network of people who believed in me and could guide me if things got difficult. Knowing I had allies made me feel less alone, and their encouragement gave me confidence to keep going. At home, I acted normal, almost like nothing had changed. I smiled, helped around the house, and kept my emotions hidden. Inside, I was calculating every step carefully. I made notes of conversations, kept records of financial statements, and organized the evidence I had already gathered. Each small action felt satisfying because I knew it was bringing me closer to justice. I also realized that this was the kind of revenge that actually mattered. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone out of anger or spite. I wasn't yelling at my parents or humiliating Ethan. Instead, I was reclaiming my rights and making sure the truth would come to light. That made every action feel empowering. Evenings were my time to work. I spent hours checking details, cross-referencing bills, and coordinating with the lawyer. I felt sharper, more focused, and more in control than I had in months. My anger had transformed into determination, and my frustration had become a tool to drive me forward. I began imagining the moment when everything would be revealed. I pictured my parents' surprise when they realized I had been quietly building my case, the look of shock and discomfort as the truth came out. I imagined Ethan realizing he couldn't depend on me to fix his life anymore. That mental image kept me focused and motivated. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt a sense of power that wasn't about hurting anyone. It was about protecting myself and claiming what was mine. Every step I took, every secret action I planned, reminded me that I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a strategist, quietly taking control of my life and my future. That was the moment I realized something important. True revenge isn't destruction. It's being smart, patient, and calculated. And I was finally ready to see it through. The day finally came when I felt ready to confront my parents. I had spent weeks gathering evidence, organizing everything, and building the confidence I needed. I knew this wasn't about yelling or punishing them. It was about showing them the truth and standing my ground. I asked them to sit in the living room. My parents, Linda and Mark, looked confused, maybe even a little smug, as if they expected me to back down. I took a deep breath and began. I calmly laid out everything I had found. How the college fund had been spent, the hidden assets they were keeping, and the lies they had told to justify their actions. I showed them receipts, statements, and notes piece by piece, without raising my voice. At first, they tried to interrupt, offering excuses and repeating the same phrases about family and Ethan needing help. But I didn't let them. I stayed firm and focused. I explained that I loved Ethan, but I would not be responsible for his choices or his rehab. I told them that he needed to face the consequences of his actions, and it was no longer my responsibility to bail him out. The room was tense. My parents looked shocked, like they hadn't expected me to be so organized or so unshakable. Their expressions shifted from disbelief to anger, but I stayed calm. I could see in their eyes that they realized I was no longer the child who would be manipulated or guilted into doing what they wanted. I also made it clear that I was not trying to hurt them emotionally. I wanted them to understand the impact of their decisions, to see that betrayal and lies had consequences. For the first time, I felt that my voice was truly being heard, that my years of hard work and careful planning were finally recognized. Ethan sat silently, unable to argue, as I explained that he had to take responsibility for his choices. I told him that no one could fix his life except him, and I would not be the one to pay for mistakes he had made. I watched as the reality began to settle in, both for him and my parents. By the end of the conversation, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I hadn't yelled, I hadn't attacked anyone personally, but I had made my stance clear. I had reclaimed my power without destroying anyone, and that made it all the more satisfying. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt a sense of justice. My parents realized that manipulation wouldn't work on me anymore. Ethan understood that consequences were real. And I finally felt like I had control over my life again, ready to move forward without being held back by guilt, lies, or stolen dreams. That day marked a turning point, not just in our family, but in myself. I had taken action, demanded accountability, and stood up for my future. And I knew that no matter what came next, I would face it with strength and clarity. In the weeks after the confrontation, everything in our family began to shift. Ethan was no longer protected or excused. My parents finally understood that I meant every word I said. When the rehab center called about his overdue payments, I didn't step in. I didn't offer help, didn't argue, didn't explain. I simply stayed quiet, letting him and my parents handle the consequences on their own. Ethan tried for a while to act like things would go back to normal. But when he realized no one was coming to rescue him, something changed in him. He had to take responsibility, just like I had told him. He enrolled in a community support program, got a part-time job, and started facing the reality he had ignored for years. It wasn't easy for him, but it was necessary. And this time, every step he took was his own. Meanwhile, I finally began focusing on my own life instead of cleaning up someone else's. I applied for every scholarship, every grant, every program that could help me. I spent long nights writing essays and preparing documents, fully determined to build a future that belonged to me. And slowly, things began working in my favor. The day I got my first scholarship email, I cried. Not because I was sad, but because for the first time in a long time, something was happening for me, not taken from me. More scholarship offers followed, and soon, I had enough support to attend the college I had dreamed about for years. When I finally stepped onto campus, it felt like stepping into a new chapter of life. The air felt lighter, the buildings felt full of possibilities, and I walked with a confidence I had never felt before. I wasn't the girl who had been betrayed. I wasn't the girl forced to give up everything for others. I was someone rebuilding her life on her own terms. My relationship with my parents also changed. They didn't argue with me anymore, and they didn't pressure me. The distance between us made them realize the weight of what they had done. They knew now that I was not someone they could push around. I could see in their eyes a quiet regret, but I didn't hold on to anger. I simply chose to move forward. As for Ethan, he slowly learned what responsibility actually felt like. Our relationship was not the same as before, but it wasn't broken either. We spoke occasionally, but without the guilt, pressure, or burden that had once been placed on me. I wished him well, but from a distance that protected my peace. With every passing week, I grew stronger, more confident, and more sure of myself. I studied hard, made new friends, explored new goals, and allowed myself to enjoy the opportunities that had once felt impossible. In the end, justice found its place, not through revenge, but through truth and boundaries. The betrayal that once crushed me became the push that led me toward a better life. I finally felt empowered, proud, and free. My future was finally my own, and I walked into it with my head high and my heart steady. Samantha often found herself thinking about everything she had gone through. It felt strange to look back and realize how much had changed in such a short time. There had been days when she thought the hurt would never stop. She remembered sitting alone, wondering how her own family could take something so important from her and expect her to simply accept it. Those memories still stung, but they no longer controlled her. Instead, They reminded her of how far she had come. She knew she could not pretend the betrayal never happened. The pain had shaped her, pushing her into moments of doubt, anger, and confusion. But it had also pushed her to stand up for herself, to take decisions she never imagined she could handle. When she looked at herself now, she saw someone stronger, calmer, and far more confident than the girl who once trusted everyone without question. Forgiveness did not come quickly. It was not a gift she offered lightly. She did not forgive because her parents had apologized or because Ethan had changed. She forgave because she no longer wanted to carry the heavy weight of resentment. Holding on to anger had drained her for too long, and she refused to let it follow her into the new life she was building. Letting go felt like lifting a stone from her chest, giving her room to breathe again. She still kept her distance, but her heart was not filled with bitterness anymore. She could speak to her parents without feeling trapped, and she could think about Ethan without the old guilt returning. She understood now that caring for someone did not mean breaking yourself to fix them. She had the right to protect her dreams, her peace, and her future. As she settled into her college life, she felt grateful for the strength she had earned. She went to classes with a quiet determination, worked on her goals with patience, and made choices that honored her own happiness. She had learned that independence was not about being alone. It was about trusting herself enough to move forward, even when the path was difficult. Some nights she would sit by her dorm window, watching lights flicker across the campus, and think about the girl she had been before everything fell apart. That girl had believed her family would always stand by her. Now she understood that life was more complicated than that. Sometimes the people you love the most can hurt you the deepest. And sometimes the only way to heal is to step away and rebuild yourself piece by piece. Her journey had not been about revenge. It had been about reclaiming what was taken from her: her future, her confidence, and her sense of worth. She had fought for all of it, not with anger, but with courage and clarity. In doing so, she discovered a version of herself she had never met before. Samantha closed this chapter of her life with a quiet sense of peace. She walked forward knowing she had survived, grown, and risen above the betrayal that once tried to break her. Her story would always remind her that strength does not come from hurting others. It comes from choosing yourself, even when it is hard.